So Act 4, Scene 3, the final scene in Act 4, is known as the Willow scene, and it's essentially Desdemona and Emilia preparing for bed, where Desdemona will be killed. So Othello tells Desdemona to go to bed and dismiss your attendants there. In other words, dismiss Emilia. I just want you to be on your own, because of course he's planning to kill her. And he gives her that imperative, that order. Emilia then reveals to us again, so again, other people revealing to us Othello's state of mind. And again, this was like indications for the actor on stage of what to do. So he looks gentler than he did. So this is maybe the idea of the calm before the storm. Or maybe Othello's calmer now because he's certain and he's convinced and he's not in doubt anymore. And the jealousy has settled inside him and he knows what he needs to do. So Emilia is very maybe concerned here or confused as to why she's being dismissed. But Desdemona, as the good wife, we must not now displease him. We must do exactly what he asks. So Desdemona is, the dramatic irony here for the audience is that, by trying to please him, she's actually sealing her own fate and making it easier for him to kill her. So again, there's a sense that she's continuing to love him, even his stubbornness and his checks and his frowns, have grace and favour in them. So this idea that when you love somebody, you love their flaws as well as their good sides, and you find something to love in everything. She then says, if I do die before you, as in before Emilia, I pray you shroud me in one of those same sheets, which are her wedding sheets. If you remember, Emilia says, I put those sheets you asked me to on the bed, which were her wedding sheets in Act 4, Scene 2. So again, there's a sense of foreboding here. And of course, Emilia does not have to do this because Desdemona dies in those very sheets. And of course, Emilia doesn't get a chance to anyway, because she dies very shortly after Desdemona in Act 5, Scene 2. We then have why this scene is known as the Willow scene, is that Desdemona tells us that her mother had a maid who used to sing this song about the willow tree, and willows, as it says here, were traditionally symbolic of forsaken lovers, and there's a feeling of the supernatural here that this is something that was kind of written in the stars, and there's this sense of foreboding that Desdemona has. So it's a very this almost, I feel, it's very mournful. She's literally getting ready to die. She's preparing herself, visually to look lovely for bed, for her husband to kill her. So it's almost like an elegy, really, before she actually goes to her death. I've put question marks here. I don't know what you think of this section. I just think it's interesting that actually Desdemona says this Lodovico is a proper man, so a good-looking man. I wonder what Shakespeare's trying to suggest here by this. What Desdemona volunteers this information. She's worried about her husband. She's talking about the willow tree. She's obviously feeling very foreboding about the trying to convince her husband she's not a whore, and then randomly starts saying that Lodovico is a good-looking man. And Emilia agrees that he's very handsome. And again, she compliments him. He speaks well. And Emilia says, "Oh yes, I know. There's women in Venice who would have worked barefoot to Palestine just to get a touch of him." So it's interpret that as you will. You might see that as evidence of Desdemona maybe having a wandering eye. I don't know. It's up to you. Have a think about it. And the reason why I'm leaving this up to you, and I'm not kind of being a teacher about it, is because almost it doesn't matter, because it's very, very clear that Shakespeare intends us to sympathise with Desdemona and feel very, very, very that her death is really tragic. So even if that is what he's suggesting, he obviously isn't suggesting that it's a big enough flaw or sin that we should feel she deserves to die in any way. And I suppose that's why I feel like it doesn't change the outcome of the play, but that's the kind of debate you could have within an essay to take an evaluative approach. So further down, we've got some evidence of female intuition. This idea of that there's the idea that females have this intuitive nature that is connected to nature and the planet and people's emotions, and that they can kind of read a room and read people's feelings. And she says, "My eyes do itch. Does that bode weeping?" So she feels like her eyes are itching to suggest that she's going to be crying later on, and that idea of her body knowing what's coming. And then we have this really innocent question, is it even possible that there are women who cheat on their husbands? Is that even possible? So she's really innocent. And what Shakespeare does in this scene, and this is the key thing, really. Emilia and Desdemona really contrast in this scene, and Shakespeare posits them against each other and puts them next to each other, so it really emphasizes how innocent Desdemona is, because Emilia is a little bit cheeky and a little bit more I don't know, I suppose you could say that she's more feminist, but she's certainly more open-minded about what a wife should be able to do. She's not as rigid, she's not as virtuous, and actually by putting her next to Emilia, Desdemona appears even more innocent and even more beautiful and kind and all the rest of it. When I say beautiful, I mean on the inside. So when Desdemona says that, surely they're not women who actually do this, Emilia is more worldly and says, of course there are. And Desdemona says she would never do it. And Emilia avoids answering whether she would cheat on her husband or not. She then follows Desdemona's language. Desdemona says, oh, well, I would never cheat by this heavenly light. And, Emilia says, no, not I either by this heavenly light. So can you see how she repeats the same noun there? So it's the idea that maybe she's lying, but then she does that comical line, well, no, I wouldn't do it by heavenly light, but I might well do it in the dark. So it's the idea that this is what I mean about being a bit cheeky, a little bit more worldly, a little bit more open-minded and willing to do things. Of course, I'm not going to make it really clear that I'm cheating, but I might do it in the dark where my husband didn't know about it, which again adds more weight to the possibility that Iago did have a reason to be jealous. Of course, his actions that he takes as a result of that jealousy are never going to be justified, no matter how much the cheating is likely. So Desdemona says, well, would you cheat for all the world? And Emilia actually is very pragmatic and said, well, yeah, because that's a great reward for such a small sin. And she sees cheating as a small vice. Okay. And she justifies this position. She says, who would not want to make a husband a cuckold to make him a monarch? So, if you gave me the world, this is where she's still very entrenched in traditional ideas of the role of women, because she's, if she was given the world for cheating on her husband, then she would be able to give the world to her husband, because her husband would own what she owns. So, yes, she thinks it would be worth to cheat on her husband, make him a cuckold, as long as she could make him ruler of the world, because she got the world from cheating. And she says, I would venture purgatory for it. So purgatory obviously being the idea of her being stuck outside of heaven and not knowing where she'd be able to end up. So she's very much focused there on service to her husband, which is the same element of her personality we saw when she stole the handkerchief. Desdemona says, no way, I would never do anything wrong, even for the whole world. So that, I could just said, the contrast between the two women there just makes Emilia seem even more idealistic and wonderful and the most perfect woman ever. You can decide how realistic she is. Okay, so this is where Emilia is maybe the most progressive that she is at all on the stage, and she actually maybe even this is even something that modern audiences might be able to stomach, this idea, but it's also full of bitterness, and there's also very much a sense here that these are Emilia's experiences, and actually, these thoughts haven't come from nowhere. This is obviously things she's seen or experienced herself, but we can only speculate the extent. So she says, I think it's their husbands' faults if wives cheat on them. She says that that men pour their treasures into foreign laps, so cheat on them. She says that they have peevish jealousies. Now, we know for certain that Iago has jealousies. They throw restraints on us as women. They strike us. We've just seen Othello do that to Desdemona. And she says, well, why shouldn't we have some revenge for that? Let husbands know that wives have sense just like them. If they can cheat on us, why can't we cheat on them? What is it that they do when they change us for others? So, do they know the damage they do to us when they go off and cheat on us, or they substitute us for younger women, for example? Is it sport? Well, yes. Yeah. So there's an element there of Emilia kind of defending women and saying that actually, let us use them let them use us well, else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us. So if we do bad things, it's because their bad things tell us to do that. Okay. Now, Desdemona doesn't reply to any of this. She's maybe not interested, or she just thinks that it's, it's very cynical, or she's just preoccupied with Othello, and she just says good night. You know, and there's that element of a prayer at the end here. If let us learn from our bad ways. Okay. I didn't actually. That is the end of the scene. I didn't actually talk about the song. It's just a really mournful song. And the idea of what it's like for women to be, made miserable by men. So yeah, it's well worth watching a version on YouTube if you need to. Okay, thank you. That is the end of Act 3. 4.